good evening, my friend. I'm grateful to have you here tonight. Wherever you are listening from, settling into bed, resting after a long day, or simply seeking a moment of quiet welcome, you're safe here. This is your time to unwind, breathe deeply, and drift gently into the soft embrace of sleep. Tonight, I'll take you on a calm journey into the past, to a Venice the world has almost forgotten. A Venice without crowds, without noise, without the weight of centuries of travelers. A Venice that once lived quietly beneath the moonlight, long before it became the shimmering dream we know today. So let your body rest, let your shoulders loosen, and let your mind wander slowly, softly, like a gondola gliding across still water. If you feel comfortable, tell me where you're listening from tonight. I always love knowing the corners of the world that gather here under the same peaceful sky. Now, close your eyes or soften your gaze as the night settles gently over the water. A thin veil of mist rises above the canals, and warm lantern light trembles in golden ripples upon the surface. The air is cool, touched by the faint scent of salt and old wood. It is the kind of night where sound travels softly, where footsteps echo in the distance, where the entire city seems to breathe in a long, quiet rhythm. But the Venice, you know, the marble palaces, the stone bridges, the grand canals, has not yet come to life. Tonight, we are stepping far back in time to a Venice that existed before history began to write its name, to a lagoon that offered refuge before it ever offered glory, to a fragile empire shaped not by power, but by survival, by silence, and by the gentle insistence of the tides. Picture the lagoon as it once was, a vast, shimmering expanse of shallow water, dotted with small muddy islands and reeds that whispered softly in the wind. In the distance, you might hear the call of a fisherman guiding his simple boat toward shore, the wooden hull brushing against the water in slow, steady strokes. These were the first Venetians, families seeking safety from the chaos of the mainland, rowing quietly toward a place where invaders could not follow. Life here was delicate, almost improvised. Wooden platforms stood on stilts above the marshy ground. Small huts leaned slightly under the weight of wind and weather. Yet in this uncertain landscape, something remarkable was happening. The people who settled here learned to listen, truly listen, to the lagoon. They studied its moods, its tides, its warnings. The water told them when to travel, where to build, how to survive. And slowly, the lagoon became not an obstacle, but a guardian. Take a slow breath as you imagine those first night's lanterns glowing behind thin wooden walls, water lapping gently below, the whisper of reeds brushing together like soft voices in the dark. Families gathered close, telling stories of the lands they had left behind, lands of stone and soil, forests and farms. Those places must have felt so far away now, compared to the shifting, shimmering world beneath their feet. Yet in this place of uncertainty, a deep sense of hope grew. The islands, once isolated, began to form tiny communities. Fishermen shared their catch. Salt workers gathered the shimmering crystals left by the sun. Traders ventured toward the mainland, exchanging fish and salt for grain and fabric. Each island had its own heartbeat, its own purpose, but they were connected by something greater, a quiet determination to build a life where life did not seem possible. Let your breathing soften as we drift among these early islands. Hear the hollow thump of footsteps on wooden planks. Feel the gentle sway of a boat tied to a wooden post. See the moon drifting slowly above the water, its reflection shimmering with every ripple. This is Venice before Venice, a place where everything was fragile, yet everything was filled with promise. And as the years drifted by, the people discovered something extraordinary about themselves. They were not simply surviving, they were building, they were dreaming. They were becoming something new, a community shaped entirely by water and courage. Tonight, we'll follow their footsteps, but for now, relax into the soft rhythm of the lagoon. Let the gentle sound of imagined waves guide you deeper into calm. This is the beginning of a forgotten empire, one that rose not from power, but from patience and quiet hope. The night deepens gently around us as we journey farther into the early heart of the lagoon. The moon hangs low, softened by drifting clouds, its reflection swaying in slow, silver waves. The water feels almost alive, warm in its welcome, steady in its rhythm. As you listen, let your breath match its movement. In, then softly out, like the tide brushing against the marshy edges of the islands. In these early centuries, life in the lagoon was simple, but it was never easy. Those first families lived with a quiet kind of awareness, always alert to the changing moods of the water. Danger rarely came with noise. Instead, it crept in silently. A rising tide, a shifting wind, a distant rumor of trouble on the mainland. Yet even in this constant uncertainty, the people found comfort in one another. Their survival depended on shared strength, and that created a bond deeper than the channels that wound between their islands. Imagine standing on a small wooden walkway at night, the damp boards cool beneath your feet. You hear only the soft creak of the planks, the gentle slap of water against the posts, and the quiet murmur of voices drifting from a nearby home. People spoke softly after dark, partly out of caution, partly out of respect for the lagoon's stillness. In a world so delicate, peace felt like a treasure to be handled with care. Every day brought new tasks, each performed with practiced patience. Nets were woven and repaired, their ropes rough beneath calloused fingers. Salt was gathered in wide, shallow pans that glimmered beneath the sun. Small boats were carved and patched, their hulls smoothed by years of tides brushing against them. These tasks were simple, but they were done with a kind of devotion. Each action, no matter how small, helped keep the community alive. On cold winter evenings, when the wind swept down from the distant mountains and carried a sharp chill across the water, families gathered tightly inside their modest homes. The walls rattled softly, but the homes held firm, strengthened by layers of care and countless repairs. Candles flickered in the drafts, casting warm, trembling shapes across the wooden beams. Children curled close to their parents, listening to gentle stories of the mainland, of ancestors, of the difficult journey that brought them to this fragile but promising refuge. Even in those moments of hardship, there was warmth, there was connection. There was the soft reassurance that, though the world beyond the lagoon might be chaotic, here they had one another, and that was enough. With time, these scattered settlements began to grow bolder. The early Venetians learned the secrets of the lagoon more deeply, studying the currents, the strength of the mud beneath their feet, the pattern of tides that rose and fell like breath. They began to shape their surroundings with quiet ingenuity. Wooden piles were driven deep into the soft earth, creating foundations stronger than anyone might have believed possible. Simple chapels rose from these wooden skeletons, their small windows glowing like gentle beacons across the water. And as these islands grew more secure, a new sense of confidence began to take root. Not arrogance that would come centuries later, but a gentle, collective belief that this shifting world could be shaped into something lasting, something beautiful, something that might one day flourish. Let your breath soften as we drift through these growing communities. Picture a narrow canal at dusk, the sky painted in fading pink and soft violet. A fisherman guides his small boat back home, its wooden hull whispering across the water. From the doorway of a modest house, a woman steps out with a lantern, lifting it high so its warm light leads her husband back through the dark. These were moments of grace, moments where life felt both fragile and full. Yet just beyond the horizon, the wider world was stirring. Empires on the mainland shifted like restless giants. Armies marched. Kings schemed. Trade routes began to open and close with the rise and fall of distant powers. The Lagoon people had no wish to involve themselves in these tangled affairs. Their lives were humble, and they valued their quiet solitude. But history, like the tide, eventually reaches every shore. Soon other eyes would turn toward this strange collection of islands, toward this improbable refuge built on patience and water. And when that time came, the Lagoon people would discover that the very hardships they had endured had prepared them for something far greater than survival. For now, rest here in this moment, listening to the water's soft rhythm. The foundations of a future empire are being laid, quietly and gently, beneath the moonlit surface. As we drift deeper into the story, the night around the lagoon grows softer, as if the darkness itself is settling down to rest. A gentle breeze carries the scent of salt and damp timber, brushing against the wooden walls of early homes. Lanterns glow like small suns along the walkways, their golden circles of light trembling each time the wind sighs. It is here, in this quiet hour, that Venice begins to take a new shape, no longer just a refuge, but something more like a promise whispered across the water. By now, the islands are no longer completely separate. Small bridges of wood connect one settlement to another, forming paths that people can cross even after the sun sinks below the horizon. You can almost hear the soft footfalls of neighbors making their way to visit friends, or the gentle splash of oars as someone paddles across a narrow canal. The lagoon, once wild and unpredictable, has become a familiar presence, a companion, a guardian, even a teacher. Families have learned to read the tides like others read the seasons. They know when the currents will run strong, when the water will fall away to expose mud and reeds, and when storms might push against the fragile edges of their world. They build higher. They reinforce their homes. They trust their instincts, sharpened by years of living in harmony with the water. Still, life remains tender here. One strong storm could change an entire island, yet the people have grown resilient, woven together by shared endurance. When a walkway collapses, neighbors lift its beams together. When a boat cracks, several pairs of hands help repair it. When food is scarce, it is divided carefully, thoughtfully, with a quiet understanding that survival belongs to all of them, not just a few. These small acts of unity begin to shape the identity of the Lagoon people, an identity rooted not in what they own, but in what they share. Let your head rest more deeply into your pillow, your breath slowing as you imagine the calm night that enveloped these early communities. Hear the soft echo of laughter drifting from an open window, warm and gentle, carrying across the water like a reassuring lullaby. Imagine a mother stepping outside to check the nets drying on a wooden rack, her lantern casting long ripples of light across the canal beside her. Imagine an elder carving a simple charm from driftwood, offering it to a child frightened by the wind rattling the walls. In these small, tender moments, the soul of Venice begins to form. As the decades pass, the settlements grow more organized. Some islands become known for fishing, their docks always lined with boats rocking gently in the tide. Others become centers for salt-making, where shallow pans shimmer beneath the sun until the water leaves behind delicate crystals. A few islands turn to trade, rowing toward the mainland to exchange what little they have for grain, cloth, or tools. Each island brings something different, and together they form a quiet network of cooperation, a fragile but determined tapestry of life woven across the water. This growing unity catches the attention of travelers who pass near the lagoon. Merchants hear rumors of a curious society living on floating platforms and wooden piles. Some dismiss the tales as fanciful, but others become intrigued. A few traders venture into the lagoon, cautiously navigating the shallow channels, surprised to find vibrant, hard-working communities where they expected only wilderness. The lagoon people are wary at first, unsure of these newcomers, but curiosity softens their caution. They learn from the merchants, gathering small pieces of news from the mainland, news of distant wars, of shifting powers, of tribes moving across the Italian peninsula. Slowly, the lagoon begins to feel less isolated, connected not just by water but by knowledge. And yet, even as the world begins to brush against its edges, the lagoon keeps its peace. Nights remain soft, filled with the same gentle rhythms. Families still gather by candlelight. Fishermen still rise before dawn, rowing through mist that clings to the water like a dream not yet ready to fade. The lagoon remains a place where quiet is cherished, where survival is shared, where the foundations of something much greater are forming quietly, patiently, beneath the moonlit surface. But history has a way of turning its gaze toward places that grow strong in silence. Soon, the lagoon will face challenges far more complex than storms and tides. Soon, it will be called to defend itself, to define itself, to become not just a refuge, but a force. And the people, shaped by hardship and perseverance, will rise to meet that moment. For now, though, rest in the calm before that awakening. Listen to the water's slow whisper. Feel the soft glow of lantern light warming the darkness. You are drifting peacefully through the early dreams of a city that will one day astonish the world. The night folds more deeply around us as we move into the next chapter of Venice's quiet becoming. The lagoon lies still beneath the sky, its broad surface a mirror for drifting clouds and the pale shimmer of starlight. There is a hush over the islands, a feeling that something is stirring beneath the calm, a subtle shift, like the faint ripple that spreads across the water before a boat appears around the bend. Venice is changing. Slowly, patiently, almost shyly, it is stepping toward its destiny. By this time, the small settlements that once felt temporary now hold themselves with quiet confidence. The people have learned to build not only for the present, but for the generations who will follow. Wooden piles are driven deeper, arranged more skillfully, forming strong foundations that hold up houses larger than any their ancestors dared to imagine. Narrow wooden walkways are replaced with broader paths. Small meeting huts become gathering places where representatives from each island discuss matters important to everyone: tides, trade, defense, shared resources. You can almost picture this scene. Beneath a roof of simple wooden beams, men and women sit on benches worn smooth by years of use. A candle stands in the center, flickering softly. Outside, the water laps gently against the posts. Inside, voices rise and fall in calm discussion. No one speaks loudly. The people of the lagoon are used to soft tones, to the rhythms of listening as much as speaking. These quiet meetings shape the earliest form of what will one day become the Venetian Republic. Not yet a state, not yet a power, but a community beginning to understand that unity is their greatest strength. They do not have kings. They do not have grand palaces. They govern through agreement, through conversation, through the shared understanding that survival belongs to everyone, not just a chosen few. Let your breath deepen and soften as you drift through this moment in time. Imagine walking through a narrow canal-side path at night, the boards cool beneath your feet. You pass houses where warm lantern light spills softly through shutters, painting golden lines across the water. From one window, you hear the sound of quiet singing, a mother soothing her child to sleep. From another, the rhythmic scrape of a craftsman shaping wood into a new or for tomorrow's journey. These simple sounds, carried on the night air, echoed the heart of early Venice, a place where life is modest but full, where every task has purpose, and where the water is both challenge and companion. As we move gently forward, the lagoon begins to reveal one of its greatest gifts, protection. Surrounded by shallow waters, difficult for invaders to cross, the islands become a natural refuge during times of trouble, when turmoil spreads across the mainland during invasions, conflicts, or political upheavals. People flee toward the safety of the marshes. The settlements swell, new families arriving with stories of fear, exhaustion, and hope. Each arrival adds another thread to the growing tapestry of the lagoon community. With more people, the islands grow livelier. Markets appear along the larger walkways. Fishermen call out greetings to one another as they unload their catches at dawn. Bakers warm their ovens long before the sun rises, filling the air with the comforting scent of fresh bread. Children run along the wooden paths, their laughter echoing across the water like tiny bells. And yet, even in this busier world, the calm remains. The lagoon has a way of quieting the mind. Perhaps it's the steady rhythm of the tides, or the soft glow of lanterns in the fog, or the feeling of the earth shifting gently beneath wooden foundations. Whatever the reason, each night brings the same soothing stillness, a reminder that life here moves at a different pace, slower, softer, more attuned to the moon and water than to the noise of distant cities. It is during these years that Venice begins to find its identity, not through conquest, but through connection. The islands learn to rely on one another not only for survival, but for trade, culture, and shared purpose. Travelers from beyond the lagoon begin to speak of a curious place where people live on water, a place that seems to float between land and sea, between reality and dream. Some come to see it for themselves. They arrive unsure of what to expect, and they leave with stories of resilience, warmth, and ingenuity. And still, the world beyond the lagoon continues to shift. Empires rise and fall, borders change, armies move, kingdoms quarrel, yet the lagoon remains steady, its people anchored not by soil, but by spirit. They have learned to build their lives on water, on change, on uncertainty, and in doing so, they have discovered a strength that those on solid land cannot imagine. Tonight, as you lie comfortably where you are, allow yourself to drift with the gentle current of this story. Feel the calm of the lagoon settle around your thoughts. Hear the soft whisper of water brushing against wooden posts. Sense the quiet determination of a community learning to thrive in a place the world once believed uninhabitable. The foundations of Venice are strengthening. The dream is growing clearer. Soon, the lagoon will give birth to a force that will reshape the history of the Mediterranean. But for now, we stay in this peaceful moment, this warm chapter where a city learns not only to survive, but to begin imagining a future as vast and shimmering as the waters that cradle it. The night over the lagoon is calm, but not empty. If you listen closely, beneath the hush of water and the quiet sigh of the wind, you can almost hear something new arriving, a faint echo from distant shores, the soft approach of change. Venice, still young, still tender, is beginning to feel the pull of a wider world. By now, the islands have grown busier, more sure of themselves. The early fear that once clung to every plank and post has softened into a steady confidence. The lagoon people know how to live with the tides. They know how to read the sky, how to feel the weight of an incoming storm in the shape of the clouds and the taste of the air. Their boats, once crude and simple, are now crafted with care and quiet pride. The oars move through the water like extensions of their own hands. Yet, beyond the horizon, the world is restless. Kingdoms rise and crumble. New rulers claim the same lands over and over, like waves crashing endlessly upon a shore. Powerful empires gaze toward the seas, imagining routes for trade, paths for ships, lines of influence that stretch across continents. And slowly, inevitably, the quiet people of the lagoon are drawn into this larger story. Imagine a soft, misty morning on the water. The sun is still low, hidden behind a veil of pale clouds. A small boat appears at the edge of the lagoon, its hull trimmed a little differently, its sails cut in a foreign style. It moves carefully, guided by a crew who clearly do not know these shallow waters as well as the locals do. From the islands, a few curious eyes watch the vessel glide closer, like a cautious visitor stepping into someone else's home. The traders on board have heard of this place, a community that lives upon the water, protected by mud and marsh, yet somehow thriving. They have come bringing goods from far away, fine cloth, precious oils, small luxuries that the lagoon people rarely see. In return, they seek something Venice has quietly begun to gather: access, routes, knowledge of the sea and its hidden paths. The lagoon people might seem humble, but they are not naive. They listen more than they speak, weighing every word, every gesture, every promise. They know that those who come from the mainland often carry not just goods, but ambitions. Yet they also understand that the tides of history cannot be held back forever. Trade, like water, will find its way. So, meetings are held in small halls, smelling of salt and beeswax. Local leaders sit side by side, their clothes simple, their hands marked by years of work. Across from them sit foreign merchants in finer fabrics, bearing the subtle perfume of other lands. The conversations are quiet, measured, but beneath the surface, something important is taking shape. The first threads of Venice's destiny as a bridge between worlds. Let your breath grow slower as you imagine these early negotiations. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just careful words, patient questions, long, thoughtful silences. The lagoon people agree to guide certain ships through safer channels, to share their knowledge of winds and currents, to help move goods from one shore to another. In exchange, they receive not only material wealth, but information, news of distant empires, of powerful rulers in the east, of shining cities that sit between continents. These stories stir the imagination of the younger generation, children who have known only the lagoon as their world. They grow up hearing of Constantinople, of ports filled with spices and silk, of ships so large they seem like floating villages. The thought of such places does not frighten them, it fascinates them. Slowly, Venice begins to turn its gaze outward, toward the open sea. And yet, even as the outside world seeps into the lagoon, the heart of Venice remains calm. Nights are still lit by lanterns, flickering in gentle arcs of gold. Fishermen still rise before dawn, rowing through the same soft mists that once enveloped their grandparents. Families still gather at small tables, sharing bread, fish, and quiet conversation. The lagoon remains both cradle and teacher, reminding its people that no matter how wide their influence grows, their strength lies in the patience and adaptability that first allowed them to live here. As time passes, Alliances begin to form. Venice offers something few others can, a safe harbor between worlds. It is not yet the grand Maritime Republic it will become, but the seeds of that future have been planted. The people who once fled to the marshes to escape danger are now learning how to turn their precarious home into a place of advantage. They understand the channels, the shoals, the winds that skim across the flat plains of water. They can guide others where others fear to sail. From your place of rest, allow your mind to wander gently along these early routes. Picture small convoys of boats moving through the lagoon at dusk, their oars dipping in slow unison. On the decks, goods are stacked neatly: barrels of salt, baskets of fish, small bundles of cloth, jars sealed with wax. Voices murmur softly in different accents, different languages, weaving together like currents blending into a single tide. This is how Venice begins to step into its role as a mediator, a listener, a careful partner in trade, not with sudden conquest, but with quiet agreements, not with loud victory, but with steady cooperation. The forgotten empire is quietly preparing itself. The lagoon, once simply a refuge, is becoming the stage on which a new kind of power will rise. Not purely military, not purely territorial, but maritime, mercantile, woven with diplomacy and patience. For now, though, let these thoughts soften as you drift deeper into calm. The water is smooth, the lanterns glow, and Venice, under the watchful eyes of stars and tides, is learning how to open its arms to the world. The night drapes itself gently over the lagoon, and the water below reflects it like polished glass. This is the hour when everything slows, when the boats are moored, when the lanterns sway in the faintest breeze, when even the birds retreat into the reeds to rest. In this calm, Venice continues to grow not just in numbers or skill, but in imagination. The people of the lagoon, once concerned only with survival, are beginning to dream. Their dreams are simple at first: a safer walkway, a larger meeting hall, better boats. But as the years glide quietly past, these dreams expand, carried by whispers of distant empires and the gentle encouragement of success. What if these islands could become something more than a refuge? What if they could shape not just their own lives, but the lives of those who crossed the seas? What if the lagoon, with all its challenges, could become not a barrier, but a gateway? Let your breath soften as we drift through this moment of possibility. Picture the islands at sunrise, the early light turning the water a muted gold. Fishermen push their boats into the gentle ripples, their oars slicing through the hush of morning. Traders prepare their goods, bundling them carefully and securing them with rope. Women sweep the walkways, their brooms brushing softly against wood worn smooth by time. Children lean over railings, watching small fish dart beneath the surface. Life feels familiar, yet there is a quiet energy in the air, a sense that the future is expanding, slowly but surely, on the tide. Much of this new confidence comes from the constant arrival of refugees seeking safety within the lagoon. Every time danger rises on the mainland during raids, political upheaval, or foreign invasions, small groups of families make their way across the calm shallows. Their boats carry not only fear and exhaustion, but also knowledge, stories, craft, and ideas. With each arrival, Venice becomes more layered, more skilled, more diverse. A weaver from the mainland brings new patterns and techniques. A metalworker offers skills never seen on the islands before. A scholar brings manuscripts wrapped carefully in cloth, determined that knowledge will survive even if cities fall. These people find refuge here, and in return, they enrich the community with their gifts. Across the islands, small workshops begin to hum with activity. You can almost hear the rhythmic tapping of hammers shaping metal, the soft rasp of woodworkers carving boat frames, the murmur of artisans trading secrets beside the glow of lamplight. The lagoon, once a shelter for the desperate, now becomes a hub for creation. It is around this time that the first true communal decisions begin to shape the identity of Venice. Leaders from each island gather more regularly, meeting in halls built upon solid wooden foundations. Their discussions grow broader, reaching beyond immediate needs toward long-term stability and shared purpose. They speak of trade routes, of defense, of alliances, of a united approach to disputes on the mainland. Little by little, the islands weave themselves into something greater than the sum of their parts. They are no longer merely neighbors connected by walkways. They are becoming a community, a proto-republic, bound together by shared interests and the quiet understanding that their future depends on cooperation. Feel your breath settle into an easy rhythm as you imagine these meetings. Candles flicker against wooden walls. The room smells of smoke and salt. Outside, the water laps softly, reminding everyone that the lagoon is always listening. Arguments do arise, of course, disagreements about fishing rights, about taxes, about where to build the next walkway. But even in conflict, the people speak with calm restraint. They know the weight of the lagoon's silence, the importance of choosing their words carefully. What emerges from these conversations is something truly extraordinary. The first outlines of the Venetian Republic. Not a republic of marble or gilded halls. Not yet, but a republic of agreement, of intention, of respect. Meanwhile, life along the canals continues with its gentle rhythm. Markets begin to grow larger, crafts become more refined, boats become sturdier, their slender shapes gliding through channels with increasing grace. Children begin to learn trades at younger ages, their hands guided by parents, grandparents, and mentors who carry generations of knowledge. As you rest comfortably, picture a quiet evening in one of these growing markets. Lanterns glow overhead, casting warm circles of light on the wooden planks. A fisherman hands a small boy a freshly caught crab, its shell glistening in the light. A woman arranges her baskets of herbs, the scent of rosemary and bay leaf drifting on the night air. Traders discuss the next tide, planning their journeys toward new ports. And above all of it, the lagoon itself watches patient, loyal, protective. But beyond the calm waters, the world continues to shift. The Byzantine Empire begins to tighten its influence over northern Italy. Powerful tribes from the north drift southward. Great cities along the Adriatic rise in prominence, seeking alliances and trade routes. The lagoon people sense these changes like a distant vibration in the water. They do not yet know how deeply these forces will shape their future, but they prepare themselves with the same quiet resilience that has always guided them. Tonight, as you sink deeper into rest, know that Venice is on the cusp of transformation. Its people are learning not only to endure, but to shape their fate. The lagoon has taught them patience, adaptability, and unity, lessons more valuable than any fortress built of stone. Soon the islands will take a bold step forward. They will define their identity, protect their autonomy, and establish themselves as a rising force in a world that does not yet realize how powerful a city built on water can become. But for now, we remain here, in this gentle moment, listening to the soft lapping of the lagoon, feeling the warmth of lantern light through the fog, and watching a young Venice learn to dream as one. The night above the lagoon feels a little heavier now, as if the sky itself senses that the days of quiet obscurity are slowly coming to an end. The stars still shine, the water still breathes in slow, sleepy ripples, But somewhere beyond the darkness, forces are gathering. Empires are rearranging themselves, like great ships changing course far out at sea. And here, among these wooden walkways and low houses, Venice is beginning to understand that it can no longer remain invisible. Rest your head a little more deeply into your pillow. Feel your body soften. We will move through this part of the story gently, like a small boat gliding over still water. By now, the communities in the lagoon are no longer only loose clusters of families. They have leaders, councils, elders, people trusted for their wisdom, their clear judgment, their steady hands in times of uncertainty. These men are not kings or princes. Many of them still wear simple clothes, still smell faintly of smoke and salt and rope, but they carry on their shoulders the responsibility of an entire people. On the mainland, the great powers are shifting. In the east, the Byzantine Empire extends its influence, sending its presence westward across the Adriatic. In the north, new tribes appear, pressing downward, testing the edges of old Roman territories. Cities fall, others fortify, and every new war sends fresh waves of refugees seeking safety among the islands of the lagoon. One evening, as the sun sinks in a soft wash of amber and rose, a gathering takes place on one of the larger islands. The hall is modest but solid, its beams thick, its floor raised above the damp ground. Inside, the air is warm and close. Men sit in rows, some with weathered faces and scarred hands, others younger, their eyes bright with nervous purpose. Outside, water laps gently against the pillars, as if listening. The question before them is simple to state, but immense in meaning. How should these scattered islands speak to the world beyond the lagoon, as separate voices, each calling out alone, or as a single voice, calm and united? Let your breathing slow as you picture the scene. A candle stands at the center, its flame trembling slightly. One elder, his hair silvered by years of salt wind, rises to speak. His voice is low, steady. He reminds them of the years of fear, of the invasions that drove their ancestors into the marshes. He speaks of storms weathered together, of walkways repaired, of food shared in lean winters. He reminds them that their strength has never come from the land beneath their feet, but from their willingness to stand together. Others add their thoughts. Some worry about angering powerful forces outside the lagoon. Others fear that too much unity might lead to new kinds of control, new kinds of burdens. The conversation flows on like a slow current, circling, deepening. In the end, a gentle agreement begins to form. If the world insists on dealing with them as a people, then they must present themselves as one. Not as a kingdom ruled by a distant crown, but as a community guided by a single figure, not a tyrant, but a caretaker. Someone who can speak to outside powers, defend their interests, and protect their fragile autonomy. From these quiet discussions, the idea of a *duke*, a *doge*, begins to crystallize. The word feels new in their mouths, but the meaning behind it is ancient. A leader chosen not for divine right, but for trust. Someone who stands at the narrow bridge between the lagoon and the rest of the world. Imagine, now the first time such a leader is chosen. There are no trumpets, no grand parades, no marble steps lined with banners. Instead, there is a sober gathering of people who understand that they are writing the first lines of a new chapter. The chosen man is not dressed in gold. He may still bear the roughness of a fisherman or the solid stance of a merchant used to lifting heavy crates. But when he steps forward, the room falls quiet. Outside, the lagoon lies still, as if listening to its own future. Let your thoughts drift with the image of this early doge walking out into the night after his selection. The air is cool. The moon is high. He pauses at the edge of a wooden walkway, looking out over the water that has shaped the lives of his people for generations. In that moment, he must feel the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders, not as a crushing burden, but as a solemn promise. He knows that he must speak with distant powers, navigate alliances, and find ways to ensure that Venice remains not a prize to be taken, but a partner to be respected. He must stand firm when others try to lay claim to the lagoon, yet stay flexible enough to keep the peace. He must be, in a way, like the water itself, yielding on the surface, but guided by deep, unseen currents. As you relax deeper into the story, imagine the nightly rhythms continuing around him. A boat bumps softly against its mooring post. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then settles. A late fisherman returns, his small lantern a warm dot of light gliding across the dark. Life goes on, as it always has, quiet and steady. But from this night forward, Venice is no longer only a scattered refuge. It is becoming a single, breathing entity. The arrival of a doge does not suddenly transform the lagoon into an empire. There are still disputes, rivalries, misunderstandings between islands. There are still storms that flood walkways and winters that test even the strongest families. But now, when ambassadors or envoys come from the mainland or from distant courts, they have someone to meet, a face that represents the many faces of the islands. This new structure brings both reassurance and unease. Some fear that power might collect like silt in the hands of a few. Others feel safer knowing there is someone to stand between them and the demands of empires. Yet because the Doge's authority is not absolute, but shaped by councils and assemblies, a delicate balance forms the beginning of a system that will define Venice for centuries. As the years drift by like slow, sleepy waves, the young republic learns to move with greater confidence. Agreements are signed, trade routes are protected. The lagoon, once a hidden refuge, slowly appears on maps and in letters carried across continents. But even as its name travels farther, its nights remain the same, filled with the whisper of water against stone, the faint glow of lanterns, and the quiet breathing of those who sleep above the tides. Tonight, as you sink deeper into rest, know that we have reached the first gentle outline of Venice as an organized power, still humble, still fragile, but united by choice. The forgotten empire is no longer only surviving. It is learning how to stand, to speak, and to be heard. Soon, we will follow Venice as it steps beyond the lagoon, guiding ships across the Adriatic, guarding trade routes, and weaving its influence through the restless world of the Middle Ages. But for now, stay here in this soft, moonlit moment, where a leader walks alone along the water's edge, and the city around him dreams quietly of the future. The night hangs softly over the lagoon, wrapping every canal, every walkway, every quiet corner of the young city in a gentle hush. Venice has changed, not loudly, not suddenly, but in the same patient, fluid manner that water reshapes the land. The people have chosen a leader. The islands have found their unity. And now, under the calm glow of lanterns reflected in the tide, Venice takes its first careful step toward the open sea. Settle yourself more deeply into your pillow. Let your breath grow warm and slow. This part of the story unfolds like a tide rolling in, gentle, steady, inevitable. In the early years of the Venetian leadership, the Doge is less a ruler and more a listener. He listens to the fishermen, to the artisans, to the elders who remember the difficult days when the lagoon was little more than a watery refuge. He listens to the counsels, to the voices of the islands, to the concerns of those who fear that too much ambition will bring danger. But he also listens to something else, something quieter, deeper, the sound of opportunity carried on the sea breeze. Trade is stirring along the Adriatic. Ships from the eastern Mediterranean glide toward Italy, carrying spices wrapped in silk, glassware glowing like jewels, and stories of markets glittering beneath hot, distant suns. These ships need safe harbors, reliable partners, guides who understand the delicate patterns of wind and water. Venice, with its calm shallows and sheltered channels, is perfectly placed to offer what others cannot. One cool morning, before the sun rises fully above the horizon, a foreign merchant ship approaches the lagoon. Its sails are dyed a deep rust red, its hull heavy with goods packed tightly for the long journey. The crew, unfamiliar with the twisting passages of the lagoon, move slowly, their eyes scanning the water for signs of danger. The sandbanks here are deceptive, and many ships that enter uninvited find themselves stuck, leaning awkwardly to one side until help arrives. But on this morning, a small boat appears, a Venetian craft, narrow, low, perfectly suited for these shallow waters. At its bow stands a young navigator, his face half hidden beneath a hood, his posture confident. With a gentle wave of his hand, he signals to the foreign ship, "Follow me, let your breath ease into the rhythm of the oars. Dip, glide, dip, glide." The Venetian navigator guides the larger ship through the winding channels. His movements are calm, precise, learned from years of reading the lagoon like a living book. When the ship finally reaches a safe anchoring place near the settlements, the sailors release a long collective sigh, a relief so deep it seems to ripple across the water. For many of them, Venice is unlike anything they have ever seen. Homes built on stilts, walkways that stretch over the tide, boats that rock against wooden posts like sleeping animals, smoke drifting upward from small chimneys, children running barefoot along narrow paths, women repairing nets with fingers quick and sure. This is not a city of marble or stone. It is a city of wood and water, humble and extraordinary. The merchants are greeted not with suspicion, but with quiet curiosity. The Venetians have learned to value new stories, new goods, new connections. In small halls, trade negotiations begin, measured, deliberate, grounded in mutual respect. The lagoon people offer fish, salt, and the growing expertise of their boat builders. In return, they receive spices, textiles, and knowledge of markets far beyond the horizon. As the conversations unfold, a realization begins to spread like dawn light across the minds of the Venetian leaders. If Venice can guide ships safely through the lagoon, if Venice can trade skillfully with distant merchants, if Venice can form alliances that stretch from the Adriatic to the east, then perhaps the lagoon is not a limitation at all. Perhaps it is the city's greatest strength. Rest your shoulders, loosen your jaw, feel the calm of this transformation seep into your thoughts. In the evenings, when the traders walk through the settlement, the sound of their footsteps mingles with the soft slap of water against the posts. They see craftsmen shaping the frames of new boats by lamplight, hammering with a steady rhythm. They see weavers spinning fibers into ropes thick enough to anchor larger vessels. They hear conversations in quiet tones, Venetian voices blended with accents from faraway lands. The lagoon becomes a place where the world meets, but gently, calmly, without the chaos and noise of larger ports. And in this meeting, Venice begins to discover something profound about itself. It is not simply a refuge on the water. It is a crossroads, a bridge, a rising heartbeat in the heart of the Adriatic. The Doge, standing on a raised walkway one cool night, looks out across the black sheen of the water. In the distance, the lights of foreign ships flicker like stars resting upon the waves. He knows that this moment marks the beginning of a new era. Venice is learning to welcome the world, not with shouts or banners, but with the quiet mastery of the sea. Let that thought settle softly in your mind, that strength can grow quietly, patiently, unseen by most. Venice is proof of it. Soon, the lagoon will become a gateway between east and west. Soon, its influence will spread far beyond the horizon. But tonight, we remain here, in this gentle moment, in the glow of lanterns, the hush of water, and the soft, rising breath of a city awakening to its own potential. The night sky above the lagoon has grown used to change. Once, it watched over a handful of flickering lights scattered across the marshes. Now, it looks down upon a growing constellation of lanterns, candles, and hearths. Each light is a small life, a story, a hope. Together, they form the quiet glow of a city learning to weave its destiny between water and stars. Sink a little deeper into your pillow. Let your breath become unhurried, like a long, gentle tide moving in and out along the shore. We are drifting into the part of Venice's story where threads begin to stretch outward, fine at first, almost invisible, but destined to carry the weight of empires. By this time, the rhythm of trade has become a familiar song across the lagoon. Boats come and go with the turning of the seasons. Some carry grain from the fertile mainland. Others bring wool, linen, and timber. A few arrive, bearing rarer treasures, delicate glassware, shimmering cloth from distant looms, fragrant spices whose scents linger in the air long after the casks are opened. Each arrival brings not just goods, but news, and with each piece of news, Venice learns a little more about the world it now belongs to. At the center of this growing network is a simple truth. The lagoon people have become trusted guides. They know the reefs, the shoals, the hidden sandbanks that can trap heavy ships. They know the moods of the winds, the way storms gather and dissolve, the hidden paths through fog that would confuse even the most experienced foreign sailor. Trust grows slowly, but once it is rooted, it is stronger than stone. Little by little, captains begin to seek out Venetian pilots, preferring their quiet competence to bold promises from others. Imagine a late afternoon at one of the early trading hubs, the place that would, in time, become the bustling heart of commerce, the Rialto. For now, it is simpler, more modest. Wooden stalls line a broad walkway raised above the water. Boats are tied along its edges, rocking softly as goods are unloaded by steady hands. The air is full of gentle sounds. The creak of timbers, the murmur of bargaining, the splash of crates carefully lowered from boat to dock. A merchant from a distant city examines Venetian salt with an appraising eye, the crystals sparkling in the fading light. Another inspects carefully crafted oars, appreciating the smoothness of the wood, the balance in their length. Nearby, a local fisherman trades fresh fish for a length of fine cloth, its color richer than anything his family has ever owned. There is no shouting, no chaos, only the steady, patient flow of exchanges, like the movement of water through a narrow channel. Let your breathing slow to match this rhythm, in and out. As goods pass from hand to hand, as trust passes from heart to heart, with trade comes responsibility. The Doge and his councils understand that Venice's reputation is now one of its most precious possessions. If ships are not safe here, they will not return. If agreements are not honored, partners will seek other ports. So laws begin to take form, quietly at first, rules about weights and measures, about the treatment of foreign merchants, about the protection of goods stored within the city. Not all disputes are avoided, of course, but many are resolved with a calm firmness that becomes part of Venice's character. At night, when the markets fall silent and the last boats of the day are tied securely in place, the lagoon returns to its soft, familiar hush. The scent of spices still lingers in the air, mingling with the smell of wood smoke and salt. Families gather in their homes, speaking in low voices about the strangers they met, the stories they heard. Children listen with wide eyes to tales of distant lands where the sun feels warmer, the buildings rise higher, and the languages sound like songs. Yet for all these wonders, there is comfort in knowing that when morning comes, the same lagoon will greet them, the same channels, the same subtle shifting of water beneath the foundations, the same steady labor that has always sustained them. Venice is changing, yes, but it is changing in a way that feels like growth rather than loss. As trade expands, so too does Venice's awareness of danger. The Adriatic, though beautiful, is not always kind. Pirates sometimes lurk along its coasts, watching for ships weighed down with cargo. Rival ports eye Venice's rising influence with a mixture of curiosity and envy. Great powers to the east and west both see the value of a city that sits like a gate between them. In response, Venice begins to think not only of boats for fishing and trade, but of ships that can protect its interests. The seeds of a great maritime fleet are planted in modest workshops, where boat builders refine their designs, strengthening hulls, experimenting with shapes that move faster through the water. The sound of hammering in the shipyards becomes a steady heartbeat echoing across the lagoon. From where you rest, imagine standing at the edge of one such yard at dusk. The skeleton of a new ship rises from the scaffolding, beams curved and fitted together with careful precision. Men work by lamplight, their shadows long, their movements sure. The smell of fresh-cut wood mixes with tar and sea air. This is not just craftsmanship, it is preparation. A quiet city of water is learning how to defend itself while it trades with the world. And yet, even as these new elements take shape, everyday life remains gentle. Children still race along narrow walkways, their footsteps quick and light. Elderly women still sit outside their homes, mending nets, their fingers moving with graceful memory. Young lovers still meet at the edges of quiet canals, exchanging soft words beneath the reflection of the moon. Venice is not yet the grand stage of politics and pageantry it will become. It is still, above all, a home. The city's relationship with distant powers, especially the Byzantine Empire, begins to take on greater importance. Venice, once under its influence as a far-flung outpost, gradually transforms into an indispensable partner. It ferries soldiers, supplies, and messages. It acts as a link between the powerful Eastern Empire and the restless lands of the West. This role brings privileges, trading rights, exemptions, and the space to grow. But it also brings obligations and risks that will one day test Venice's loyalty and cunning. For now, though, let your thoughts drift on the calmer waters of this chapter. The forgotten empire is still in its youth, its greatest triumphs and most difficult choices lying ahead. Tonight, it is enough to feel the quiet pride of a people who have turned a precarious refuge into a place of trust. A place where ships come not only for shelter, but for partnership. Listen, in your imagination, to the soft clink of coins exchanged under lantern light. Hear the whisper of fabric being folded, the faint jingle of metal tools tucked away for the night. Above it all, hear the ever-present lullaby of the lagoon water brushing against stone and wood, reminding Venice that everything it is becoming still rests upon the patient, shifting heart of the sea. The night over the lagoon feels deeper now, as if the darkness itself has thickened into something protective and ancient. Lanterns sway gently above calm water, their reflections trembling like golden threads that refuse to break. Venice is changing again, not in haste, not in noise, but with the same quiet certainty that the tide brings each dawn. The city has learned to trade, to guide ships, to earn trust. Now it must learn something new. It must learn to build. Let yourself sink deeper into comfort. Feel your breath settle into an easy, warm rhythm. Tonight we drift into the birth of one of Venice's greatest marvels, the Arsenale, the ship-breeding heart of a rising maritime power. Long before Venice becomes famous for its grand galleys and proud fleets, the earliest signs appear in the soft glow of lamplight along the water. In simple workshops, boat builders refine their craft. They experiment with lengths of timber, testing how different curves glide across the surface. They whisper to one another in low voices, sharing techniques brought from distant lands by refugees. They soak wood in seawater, study how beams bend, how hulls respond to weight, how oars carve through waves. But as trade expands, as new alliances form, as more ships arrive asking for guidance and protection, the councils begin to understand a truth too large to ignore. Venice can no longer rely on small, scattered workshops to build what the future demands. It needs a place of strength, a place of coordination, a place where skill becomes strategy. It needs a great shipyard, a heart that can pump life into an entire fleet. The idea begins as a quiet conversation, spoken in a meeting hall that smells of salt, wax, and old wood. The Doge listens as advisors speak of threats on the sea, of pirates lurking along the Dalmatian coast, of political turbulence stirring across the Adriatic. They speak, too, of opportunity, of merchants willing to trade more if Venice guarantees their safety, of foreign rulers who admire the lagoon people's growing mastery. Slowly, the conversation becomes a vision, a center of craftsmanship and defense, a place where shipbuilders work side by side, where tools are sharpened at dawn and hulls rise from scaffolds like skeletons of sleeping giants. The Arsenale. Let your breathing deepen slightly, like a long tide drawing in. Picture the early plans being sketched in charcoal on rough wooden tables. Hands trace the outlines of docks, ramps, storage sheds. Voices murmur, offering ideas, adjustments, improvements. Outside, the lagoon laps against the posts, as if listening to the birth of something monumental. The chosen site lies on the eastern edge of the growing city, near quiet stretches of water where space is abundant and easily defended. Workers prepare the land, driving wooden piles deep into the mud until they form a forest beneath the water's surface, pillars strong enough to hold entire buildings. Slowly, walls rise, roofs take shape, and then the sound begins. The rhythmic strike of hammers, a sound that will one day define Venice. You can almost hear it now, a steady, calming pattern beneath the night. Asterisk, tack, tack, tack. Asterisk, wood against metal, metal against wood. A heartbeat carved by human hands. The first structures of the Arsenale are humble compared to what it will one day become, but they are strong, practical, efficient. Long halls where timber is cut and treated, covered docks where hulls take shape, storage rooms where ropes, oars, masts, and sails are arranged in careful order. For the first time, Venice builds not merely boats, but ships. vessels meant for trade, for diplomacy, and when needed, for war. Let your shoulders soften as we drift through these early days. Imagine standing at the edge of the newly built Arsenale, watching craftsmen move with quiet purpose. Sparks rise from forges. Men carry beams across wooden planks. Young apprentices run errands, eager to learn. The smell of heated iron mingles with the scent of pine and sea spray. It is hard, meticulous work, but it is filled with pride. As months pass, the Arsenale becomes more than a shipyard. It becomes a symbol. Foreign merchants see its growing halls and understand. Venice is serious. Venice intends to protect its waters. Venice is preparing for the future. The Byzantines, Venice's powerful eastern partners, take note. They begin granting the Lagoon people new privileges, reduced tariffs, trade routes secured in writing, special rights in distant ports. The more Venice can build, the more valuable it becomes in the eyes of great empires. At night, after the last hammer has fallen silent and the forges glow only faintly, workers gather on the docks. They sit on crates or lean against the wooden posts, washing the day's sweat from their foreheads with cool water. They speak softly of their dreams, their hopes for their children, their pride in shaping something that will carry the city beyond the horizon. Imagine the moonlight reflecting on half-finished hulls, making them look like giant shadows resting on their sides. Imagine the quiet voices drifting across the water, blending with the gentle whisper of the night breeze. This is how the Arsenale lives in its youth, not as a factory of war, but as a cradle of craft, built on skill, cooperation, and whispered ambition. As Venice grows stronger at sea, its identity begins to evolve. It is no longer the frightened refuge it once was. It is becoming a force, not driven by conquest, but by mastery, by knowledge, by the understanding that whoever controls the sea controls the flow of goods, the movement of people, the balance of power. But Venice does not boast. It does not shine brighter than it must. It builds, quietly, steadily, like the tide rising under moonlight. Tonight, as you rest, imagine yourself drifting slowly along the silent waters near the Arsenale. The night is cool. The air tastes faintly of wood smoke and salt. Behind you, the city breathes in soft lantern light. Ahead of you, the future of Venice is taking shape, plank by plank, beam by beam, dream by dream. Soon, the Arsenale will become the greatest shipyard in Europe. Soon, Venice will command fleets that carry its lion-emblazoned banners from the Adriatic to the Holy Land. But that is still far in the future. For now, we remain here, in this peaceful moment, where the first ships of a forgotten empire rest gently in their cradles, waiting for the tide that will carry them into history. The night above Venice feels a little more sure of itself now, as if the stars recognize that the city beneath them is no longer only a scattered cluster of islands. The lagoon glows softly with lantern light, and in the distance, the long shadow of the Arsenale stretches across the water like a sleeping guardian. Venice has learned to build. It has learned to trade. Now, it begins to learn something deeper, how to speak in its own name. Sink a little further into comfort. Let your breath loosen, slow and easy, as if you were floating on your back in calm, dark water. We are entering the time when symbols, laws, and quiet confidence begin to shape the soul of this forgotten empire. By now, the presence of the Byzantine Empire still hangs over Venice like a distant, watchful moon. For centuries, the Lagoon's people have balanced their relationship with this powerful eastern partner, obedient but not submissive, loyal but quietly protective of their own interests. Byzantine governors and officials have come and gone, carrying orders, privileges, and expectations. But something has changed. Venice has ships now, ships built in its own Arsenale, refined by its own hands. It has merchants who walk confidently in foreign ports. It has pilots whose names are spoken with respect along the Adriatic. And most importantly, it has a growing sense of itself as asterisk, not just a subject asterisk, but a partner. One evening, under the soft light of candles in a grander hall than before, the Doge and his councillors gather. The room is still simple, but it carries an air of growing weight. The walls are hung with a few carefully chosen symbols, modest banners bearing the marks of the city's patron saint, a winged lion that has begun to appear more and more often on seals, documents, and carved stone. The Lion of St. Mark. Let your breathing follow the slow rise and fall of the candle flames in your mind, in and out, steady and calm. The story goes that long ago, the relics of St. Mark the Evangelist were brought to Venice from distant Alexandria, hidden beneath layers of pork to disguise them from Muslim inspectors who would not touch the forbidden meat. Whether every detail is true or softened by time, the Venetians embrace this tale as part of their identity. They see themselves as protectors of St. Mark, and in turn they feel protected by him. The winged lion, his symbol, becomes the emblem of Venice. Not a roaring, ferocious beast, but a calm, dignified figure, often depicted with one paw resting on an open book. Sometimes the book bears gentle words of peace. Sometimes it is closed, hinting at strength held in reserve. In either case, the lion embodies what Venice is learning to be: watchful, wise, willing to defend itself, yet always cloaked in poise. Imagine the first time this lion begins to appear in public places, carved into a small stone plaque above a doorway, painted onto a banner that flutters over a council hall, pressed into a wax seal that closes a letter sent to a distant ruler. Each time it whispers the same message: Venice is here. Venice remembers. Venice stands under the protection of its own patron, not only borrowed authority. As this symbol spreads, so too does the city's legal and political structure grow more defined. Councils gain clearer roles. The Doge, once more fluid in his authority, becomes part of a more structured system. He is still the face of Venice, but he is balanced by councils that represent the interests of powerful families and merchants. No single person may rise so high that he overshadows the city itself. Venice, quietly, is building a republic, not one ruled by the roar of a crowd, but by a complex, carefully balanced web of voices. Let your shoulders relax as you picture the life of the city during this time. In the morning, the markets hum with gentle energy. Fishermen unload their catch, handing baskets of gleaming silver fish to waiting buyers. Merchants arrange bolts of cloth dyed in reds and blues, their fingers smoothing the fabric like water. Scribes sit in shaded corners, copying contracts and letters with precise strokes, their ink smelling faintly metallic. Each document they sign, each agreement they seal, carries the weight of Venice's growing identity. The lion's image presses into the wax with a soft, final asterisk click. Asterisk, a tiny sound that echoes across oceans. Beyond the lagoon, other powers begin to recognize this transformation. They may still speak of Venice as a subject of the Byzantine emperor, but in practice they treat it with increasing respect. Venetian envoys walk into foreign courts with straight backs and calm expressions. They speak for a people who have survived floods, invaders, hunger, and uncertainty. They are difficult to intimidate. At sea, Venetian ships now sail farther, their hulls stronger, their crews more experienced. They carry not only goods, but messages, treaties, and sometimes soldiers. The lion-emblazoned banners flutter from their masts, catching the wind as if it too bows for a moment before continuing on its way. Yet, for all this growing power, the city still remains gentle at night. From where you rest, imagine wandering through Venice after sunset during this time. The air is cool, touched by the scent of the sea and the faint sweetness of burning oil. The sky is a deep blue, sprinkled with stars. Lanterns glow along bridges that now arch gracefully over the water. Some buildings are still simple and wooden. Others have begun to show hints of stone, of arches influenced by distant Byzantine styles. A curve here, a carved pattern there. You walk past a small square where people gather in the fading light. A storyteller shares a tale of St. Mark's relics arriving by boat, their journey cloaked in secrecy. A child stares up, eyes wide, at the idea that a saint crossed the sea to rest here. Somewhere above, a small sculpture of a winged lion looks down from a corner of the rooftop, its stone gaze fixed on the canal. Venice is learning something essential. Power need not always shout. Sometimes it can speak in symbols, in steady agreements, in the quiet confidence of a city that refuses both domination and chaos. The balance is delicate. The Byzantine Empire is still strong. Other Italian cities, like Genoa and Pisa, are beginning to emerge as maritime rivals. The Holy Roman emperors look with interest toward the northern Italian plain. But Venice moves carefully, like a gondola gliding through a narrow passage. It chooses its words. It chooses its deals. It steps carefully between alliances, seeking advantage while preserving independence. As you drift toward sleep, feel the calm, deliberate nature of this growth. Venice does not rush. It listens. It observes. It makes its moves when the tide is right. Soon, the city will be drawn into great conflicts and greater opportunities. Crusades to the east, rivalries with other sea powers, moments of triumph and of moral compromise. But all of that lies ahead. For tonight, we remain here, under the watchful eyes of the first lions carved in stone, in a Venice that is just beginning to understand the strength of its own voice, an empire not yet fully seen by the world, but already alive in the quiet beating of its heart. The night spreads a gentle, silvery hush over Venice, and the water beneath the bridges reflects the moon as if holding it carefully in cupped hands. The city has grown, still quiet in its soul, still soft in its nighttime glow, but undeniably stronger. The winged lion looks down from stone lintels and wooden banners. Ships leave the Arsenale with confidence. Trade winds bring new faces, new goods, new stories. And now, the world beyond the Adriatic begins to call more urgently. Settle yourself a little deeper. Let your breath flow like a slow, warm tide. Tonight, we drift into the years when Venice becomes not just a place of refuge and trade, but an essential partner in currents far larger than the lagoon itself. The Mediterranean in this era is a restless theatre. Powers rise, falter, rise again. The Byzantine Empire continues to hold vast influence in the East, but it watches nervously as new forces push against its borders. In the West, the papacy exerts spiritual authority and seeks loyal allies. Kingdoms quarrel over land and inheritance. Merchant cities along the Italian coast spar quietly, each hoping to shape its own fate across the waves. Venice stands in the middle of these shifting tides, a city on water, but a city with a growing voice. During these years, foreign envoys begin arriving more routinely. They approach the lagoon cautiously, sailing toward the intricate channels with eyes wide and brows furrowed. Some of them have heard stories of Venice's shallows swallowing the careless. Others have only vague descriptions of a city built on the sea. But when they arrive, guided by Venetian pilots, they are struck by the quiet magic of it. Mist curls around wooden posts. Bridges rise gracefully from island to island. Boats glide like shadows. Lanterns sway over doorways where gentle voices greet visitors with soft, careful formality. It feels like stepping into a dream. One late evening, a delegation from the Byzantine Empire arrives. Their robes are rich, deep blues and golds that shimmer in lamplight. They carry scrolls, gifts, and expectations. As they walk along the main walkway toward the council hall, they glance around with interest, seeing the subtle influences of their own empire here. The arch of a doorway, the curve of a window frame, the glittering mosaic in a chapel alcove. They do not expect to be surprised, but they are. The Doge greets them not as a frightened subject, but as a calm partner. His clothing is modest but dignified. His voice is low and steady. When he speaks, he addresses them as equals. The councillors beside him carry themselves with the same quiet confidence. Fishermen's sons, merchants' grandsons, men shaped by tides and trade and careful thought. The Byzantines realize something. Venice has grown beyond their grasp, not with rebellion, but with competence. Let your breath deepen as we step into the conversation that follows. Not loud or dramatic, but measured, like the pulse of a steady, or the envoys present their requests. Help transporting goods, assistance defending coastal routes, renewed promises of loyalty. In return, they offer privileges, gold, and rights to trade in distant ports. It is a familiar dance, one they have performed with many cities. But Venice moves differently. The councillors speak softly but firmly. They point out that their fleets now guard the Adriatic more reliably than imperial patrols. They explain that their merchants are essential in connecting eastern riches to western markets. They mention that Venice's knowledge of the sea cannot be replaced or ignored. The Doge's words, respectful yet confident, make something clear. Venice's worth is no longer a gift from the empire. It is earned. The negotiations end not with the Byzantines giving orders, but with an agreement of mutual benefit. This marks the beginning of a subtle shift, one that will change the course of Venice's future. At the same time, envoys from the papacy visit the lagoon. Their mantles trail behind them like soft shadows. They speak of unity, of faith, of the role Venice could play in supporting Christian lands across the sea. They appeal to the Venetians' devotion to Saint Mark, to their emerging identity as a safe harbour for believers and travellers. Yet Venice listens with the same balanced calm. The city respects the papacy deeply, but it does not bend without thought. The councils weigh each request, each promise, with the steady patience of a people who have learned to consider the tides before setting sail. This ability to listen without surrendering, to negotiate without submitting, becomes one of Venice's greatest strengths. While envoys arrive and depart, life in the lagoon continues with its gentle cadence. Merchants clean their stalls after long days of trade. Children play along the walkways, their laughter skipping across the water like pebbles. Lovers stroll beneath the moonlight, their fingers intertwined, sharing whispered dreams. Elderly women pray softly in small chapels, candles casting warm halos on their faces, and everywhere the water speaks. Its soft lapping reminds the people that change is constant but manageable. That strength lies in adaptation, that the sea itself lives with both calm and challenge. As Venice grows more confident, it also grows more cautious. Rivals begin to watch closely. Pisa eyes the lagoon's eastern connections. Genoa sharpens its ambitions along the western coasts. Even the distant kingdoms notice how Venetian ships glide effortlessly between worlds. But for now, conflict is only a whisper on the wind. Tonight, Venice is still a city of quiet diplomacy, a place where deals are made in candlelight, where trade routes are sketched on parchment, where alliances are shaped by calm voices rather than by force. In these peaceful moments, the lagoon feels timeless. The stars above reflect in the still water, and the wooden posts that hold up the city seem to hum with centuries of memory. As you rest, imagine drifting slowly along a canal during these years. Your boat moves gently, rocked by the faintest ripple. Lanterns glow in warm circles along the banks. A distant lute plays in a small square. A priest walks past, his robe brushing the ground. A merchant counts coins under the soft light of his doorway. A young woman lights a candle in her window, saying a prayer for someone sailing far away. This is Venice as its name begins to echo across the Mediterranean, a city of water, wisdom, and watchful diplomacy. Soon, far sooner than anyone expects, the world will call upon Venice not only for trade or negotiation, but for war. The Crusades are approaching on the horizon, a tide of both opportunity and moral weight. And when they arrive, Venice will step into its most controversial and powerful era. But tonight, we remain here, in this gentle pause before the storm, a Venice illuminated by moonlight, strengthened by its unity, and quietly becoming something the world has never seen before. The night over Venice is calm, but there is a faint tension in the air now, like the tightness of a sail just beginning to fill with wind. The lagoon still glows with its familiar lantern light, still breathes with its slow rhythm of tide and silence, but beyond the horizon, a new kind of movement begins to stir. Not the quiet arrival of traders, nor the humble approach of refugees, but the gathering of armies cloaked in faith and expectation. Let your body grow heavier against the bed. Let your breath flow gently, like a boat gliding out of the harbor under a sky of soft stars. We are drifting into a time when Venice's calm waters will carry not only goods and messages, but pilgrims and warriors. Across Europe, the call for crusades begins to echo. Preachers stand in town squares, their voices rising in the open air as they speak of holy lands, distant shrines, and the promise of spiritual reward. Knights and commoners alike feel that call tug at their hearts. Some are moved by devotion, others by hope of glory or escape. Whatever their reasons, they all share the same simple problem: how to reach the East. The road by land is long and perilous. The seas, however, offer another path if someone can guide them. Venice, sitting quietly at the edge of the Adriatic, understands the sea better than almost anyone. It has ships, it has pilots, it has the Arsenale, ready to build more vessels if needed. And it has a long habit of weighing each opportunity carefully, like a merchant feeling the balance of a scale. Imagine a cool morning when envoys from northern lands arrive in Venice, weary from travel, their cloaks dusty, their faces lined with both hope and uncertainty. They walk along the wooden paths, marveling at the city rising from water. To them, Venice seems almost unreal, a place suspended between worlds, a fitting threshold to cross before embarking on a journey toward the holy places of the East. They come before the Doge and his counselors, speaking of large numbers of men who need passage, of supplies to be carried, of fleets to be assembled. They ask Venice to build ships, to transport armies, to guide them across seas they do not know. In return, they promise payment, alliances, and the favor of kings and preachers. Let your breathing slow as you picture the hall where these requests are heard. Candles flicker softly. The faces of the councillors are calm, thoughtful. They know what such a decision means. It is not simply a business agreement. It is a choice that will carry Venice deeper into the currents of history, into conflicts and moral questions that cannot be easily escaped. But Venice has always lived by the sea's rules, and the sea does not offer the luxury of standing still. It teaches balance, not withdrawal, so the city agrees. The Arsenale grows busier than ever. Hammers ring in steady, echoing rhythms from dawn until dusk. Planks are shaped, masts raised, sails sewn in long hauls, scented with fibres and tar. The sound of work becomes a kind of music, a heartbeat that pulses through the lagoon. Men and boys carry supplies, coil ropes, polish oars. Each ship that slides into the water is a promise fulfilled, and a burden accepted. When the time comes for the Crusaders to depart, Venice changes in tone just for a moment. Streets that usually hum with quiet trade fill with the clank of armor, the murmur of foreign tongues, the soft prayers whispered by those who stay behind. Mothers clasp the hands of sons who will sail east. Wives straighten the cloaks of husbands who may not return. Priests bless the ships, tracing signs in the air as banners flutter in the wind. From where you rest, imagine standing on a pier at dawn, watching a fleet ready itself. The water is calm, tinted in pale gold by the rising sun. The ships rock gently, anchored in place until the tide is just right. The winged lion flutters on flags above the decks. Men cross themselves, murmur last words, grip the wooden rails. Then, slowly, the ropes are cast off. Oars dip into the water in perfect rhythm. Sails open with a soft sigh as they catch the wind. One by one, the ships slip away from the lagoon, their wakes trailing like glowing lines beneath the early light. The city that built them watches in silence, proud, anxious, thoughtful. In these early crusades, Venice plays a role that is both practical and profound. It transports armies, supplies, and spiritual hopes across the sea. Its ships become bridges between continents, its harbors places of gathering and farewell. For a time, this brings wealth, prestige, and new privileges in ports along the eastern Mediterranean. Venetian quarters begin to appear in distant cities, small enclaves of lagoon life transplanted onto foreign shores, with their own chapels, warehouses, and markets. Yet beneath the surface, the tide carries more than opportunity. It carries risk. Crusaders do not always pay what they promise. Politics twist and turn around the crusading ideals. Leaders argue, redirect, and sometimes compromise the very missions they claimed to serve. Venice, entangled in these shifting currents, must make choices that will leave marks on its conscience as well as its ledgers. The most famous of these choices, the diversion of a later crusade toward Christian Constantinople rather than the Holy Land, lies further ahead, like a darker cloud on the horizon. Tonight, we need not step fully into that storm. It is enough to understand that as Venice's role grows, so does the weight of its decisions. Even as fleets depart and return, the lagoon itself remains steady. At night, after the shouting and bustle of departure have faded, the city returns to its familiar softness. Lanterns sway over quiet canals. The moon lays a silver path across the water. A mother lights a candle for a son at sea. An old man sits at the edge of a dock, listening to the gentle lapping of waves, remembering the days when the lagoon held only wooden huts and frightened refugees. Venice has come far from those days. It is now a city whose choices can alter the fate of empires. And yet, in the soft hush of night, it is still a place of small sounds and tender moments, a reminder that behind every banner, every fleet, every decision, there are human hearts that love, fear, hope, and grieve. As you drift deeper toward sleep, hold that image gently, the forgotten empire before the world fully arrives, standing at the threshold of great events, its ships ready, its people watchful, its waters luminous under the quiet moon. The night over Venice shifts once more. It feels fuller now, richer, almost thick with memory. The water below reflects not just the moon, but centuries of footsteps, whispers, bargains, prayers, and soft goodbyes. Venice, once a fragile refuge rising from the marshes, has become something astonishing, a city at the height of its influence, yet still wrapped in the same gentle hush that has always defined it. Settle deeper into your pillow. Let your breath move slowly, like a gondola drifting beneath a low stone bridge. We have reached the moment in history when Venice becomes the Venice people dream about: luminous, powerful, serene. By this time, the city is no longer merely a collection of islands. It is an intricate maze of canals and bridges, palaces and markets, shipyards and chapels. Stone has replaced wood in many places. Marble has begun to gleam along the foundations. Byzantine influences shimmer in mosaics, arches, and dome crowns. The sea breeze carries scents from faraway lands, spices from the Levant, perfumes from Egypt, wool from the north, silks that feel almost like breath in the hands. At night, these streets glow softly. Lanterns hang from iron hooks, their warm circles of light touching the water in ripples of honey and gold. Gondoliers glide silently through narrow canals, their oars dipping without a splash. Lovers hold hands on the Rialto bridge. Merchants, weary from long days of negotiation, linger outside taverns, speaking quietly about ships soon to arrive or markets soon to shift. Venice is at peace, and in its own way at its peak. But this is not a noisy empire. Its greatness does not thunder across continents like Rome or blaze on battlefields like the Mongols. Venice's power is gentler, woven with diplomacy, commerce, and silence. It commands not by force, but by presence. A presence built patiently across centuries of listening to the sea. Let your breath fall into a slow, comforting pattern. Imagine wandering through the city at this time, when the Republic is strong and its identity fully formed. You walk along the Riva degli Schiavoni, hearing the soft murmur of foreign sailors and the creaking of ships from every corner of the Mediterranean. You pass through the arches of the Doge's palace, with its delicate marble tracery glowing softly in torchlight. In the great hall, the walls are covered with depictions of Venice's victories and alliances, but inside the chamber, the atmosphere remains respectful, almost contemplative. The Doge presides over councils that guide the Republic with layered wisdom. Power is shared, checked, balanced. No man may rise too high, no family may claim too much. The city has seen the dangers of concentrated authority, and it has built safeguards out of caution and reason. The system is intricate, sometimes slow, but incredibly stable, a testament to Venice's belief that endurance matters more than spectacle. In markets, business continues well into the night. The Rialto is no longer a simple trading walkway. It is the beating heart of the city's commerce. Tents and stalls line the squares. Vendors call softly, never shouting, offering figs, olives, fabrics, glass beads, and warm bread. Bankers sit behind small wooden tables, counting coins by candlelight, recording transactions with quiet precision. Venice has become the financial center of Europe, not loudly, not boastfully, but faithfully, through trust and reliability. The city's glassmakers, now settled on the island of Murano, work by the glow of blazing furnaces. Inside their workshops, molten glass spins like captured starlight, shaped into delicately twisted vessels, shimmering beads, mirrors polished until they reflect even the faintest glow. At night, the furnaces cast a soft orange halo above the island, flickering against the dark sky like a distant constellation. Let your breathing soften. Hear the faint echo of footsteps on stone. Wander with me a bit farther, through narrow alleys where laundry hangs between windows like ribbons in the breeze, past small chapels where nuns murmur prayers in voices as soft as wind on water, across bridges where the stone is cool beneath your hands, into courtyards where fountains whisper secrets only the night can hear. Venice is prosperous, serene, and deeply human, a place made not for war, but for life. And yet, beneath this peace, the complexities of empire run deep. The Republic's territories stretch along the Adriatic coast, Dalmatian ports, fortified islands, and small towns protected by Venetian garrisons. Its merchants hold privileged positions in Constantinople, Alexandria, and the ports of Cyprus and Crete. Venetian ships protect trade routes, diplomatic envoys move between courts, their steps as measured as the city's own heartbeat. Even in its height, Venice remains careful. It understands that every advantage carries a cost, that every decision creates ripples, that allies can become rivals, and rivals can become allies with a single shift of the wind. But the lagoon, in its quiet wisdom, keeps the city grounded. It reminds Venice of its beginnings, wooden huts trembling in the wind, families huddling together in the dark, boats shaped by humble hands. Perhaps this memory, more than any law or tradition, preserves the city's humility in the midst of its greatness. As you drift deeper toward sleep, imagine yourself in a small boat gliding through the Grand Canal on a warm night during this golden age. The water reflects the lights of palaces whose windows glow like amber jewels. The gentle splash of the oar is the only sound. A soft breeze touches your face. Ahead, the domes of churches rise like silent guardians, their silhouettes traced against the starlit sky. Venice, at its height, is not a loud empire. It is a quiet miracle, a city that learnt to build beauty from danger, stability from uncertainty, strength from silence. But even the strongest tide changes, and as centuries pass, new challenges begin to drift toward the lagoon like distant waves. Economic shifts, new trade rivals, political pressures, all approach gently at first. For tonight we pause here, in the glow of Venice's brightest moment. The forgotten empire before the world arrived in overwhelming numbers, before decline and restoration, stands here in the moonlight, serene, confident, and timeless. The night over Venice still looks perfect. The moon rests on the lagoon like a silver coin left gently on velvet. Palaces still glow with warm light. Gondolas still drift with unhurried grace. From the surface, nothing seems to have changed. The city appears as serene and unshakable as ever. But history, like water, often changes things quietly from beneath. Let your body grow heavier, your breath slower, like sand sinking gently through clear water. We are moving into the part of Venice's story where decline does not come as a crash, but as a long, soft exhale. Far beyond the horizon, winds are shifting. New ships cut across oceans Venice never mastered. Sailors from Portugal and Spain begin to circle Africa, reaching India and the East without passing through the Mediterranean at all. Goods that once had to cross Venice's waters, spices, silks, precious materials, now find new routes, new harbors, new patterns of trade. Venice does not fall in a day. It does not shatter, it simply begins to feel less necessary. In the markets, the change arrives quietly. A familiar merchant might mention that a shipment from the east is late, not because of storms or pirates, but because it never came this way at all. Another trader speaks in a low voice about new ports beyond the Pillars of Hercules, places at the ocean's edge where ships with high sides and strong sails are loading treasures directly from distant seas. On the surface, life goes on. The Rialto still hums in the daytime. The Arsenale still builds and repairs ships. Glass furnaces still glow like captured suns on Murano. But beneath the daily rhythm, a subtle unease begins to rise, like a faint current moving under calm water. Let your breath slip in and out gently. Imagine walking through the city during this time, perhaps in the fading light of a late afternoon. The streets are still beautiful. Stone facades still carry delicate carvings. Windows still hold shimmering glass. Yet here and there, you notice a shutter that hasn't been repaired. A warehouse door that remains closed more often than before. A merchant stall that carries fewer exotic goods, replaced by more ordinary wares. Nothing is ruined, nothing is broken. But the sense of endless growth has softened into something quieter. A plateau, a gentle slowing. At the same time, new pressures build elsewhere. The Ottoman Empire grows stronger in the east, taking cities and coasts that once welcomed Venetian ships. Fortresses along distant shores must be defended at greater cost. Alliances have to be bought with more gold, more effort, more delicate diplomacy. Venice, once almost weightless on the water, begins to feel the weight of its own commitments. In council halls, the discussions turn heavier. Men who once debated how to expand trade now worry about how to protect what remains. The Doge still presides in his ceremonial robes. The lion still watches from the walls, but the choices feel more complicated, the risks more pronounced. Should they hold on to far-flung territories, or retreat and conserve? Should they spend their strength in war or in careful negotiation? Venice, as always, chooses balance. But even balance, over time, demands energy. And yet, at night, the city remains beautiful. From where you rest, imagine floating along a narrow canal well after sunset in these later years. The water is dark and calm, reflecting small points of light from scattered windows. A cat steps carefully along a ledge, its shadow slipping silently along the wall. Somewhere, behind a half-open shutter, a lute sings a quiet, melancholy melody not of tragedy, but of remembrance. You pass a once splendid palace whose paint has begun to fade. Its columns are still strong, its balconies still elegant, but the brightness of its surfaces has softened. The family within still holds its name, but their influence is not what it once was. They speak fondly of older days, days when their ancestors negotiated with distant sultans and emperors, days when their halls were filled with foreign guests and bustling servants. Now, the rooms are fewer in use, the footsteps lighter. This is not a collapse. It is a gentle dimming. Economically, the city adjusts as best it can. Venetian merchants invest in land on the mainland. They trade more in European goods than in Eastern luxuries. The city turns some of its attention inward, cultivating its own culture, its art, its music, its rituals. Painters fill canvases with scenes of canals and masked figures. Composers write works that echo softly through church, naves, and noble parlors. Venice starts to become not just a power, but a symbol, a place people admire for its beauty and strangeness, as much as for its influence. Let your breath soften even more as you picture a festival night in this later Venice. The city, aware of its own aging, dresses itself with particular care. Lanterns glow along the Grand Canal. Masks and costumes add mystery to faces that carry memories of centuries. Music drifts from open windows. Gondolas glide beneath bridges, carrying laughter and secrets. For visitors, Venice still feels like a dream, unreal, impossible, floating. They do not see what has been lost. They see only the shimmering surface, the art, the architecture, the light, and perhaps, in a way, that is part of Venice's quiet victory. Even as it slowly steps down from its role as a central power, it remains unforgettable. As the years drift by, small signs of strain continue to appear. Plagues sweep through from time to time, leaving silence in their wake. Floods rise higher in certain seasons, pushing water into squares and courtyards more often than before. The wooden piles beneath the city, those patient guardians driven centuries ago into the mud, continue their work. But the world above them grows older, more fragile. Yet the lagoon holds Venice gently. It rocks the city like a cradle that remembers every stage of its life, from frightened huts to gleaming palaces, from restless ambition to reflective calm. As you drift nearer to sleep, imagine standing at the edge of the water on a cool, foggy night in this era. The mist is thick, wrapping the city in softness. You can barely see the opposite bank of the canal. Sounds are muffled, a distant or a quiet cough, the faint toll of a bell far away. In this blurred, gentle world, it is hard to know whether Venice is rising or fading. It seems to float outside of time altogether. That is the secret of its grace. Even as its power wanes, its soul remains luminous. Soon, the tides of politics will move on without Venice at their center. New nations, new ships, new engines of change will define the modern age. But Venice will remain what it has always been at night, a place of water, light, memory, and whispered stories, waiting for anyone who wishes to close their eyes and drift back to the forgotten empire before the world arrived in overwhelming numbers. For now, let the image of this quiet, gently aging city rest in your mind like a lantern on still water, warm, steady, and calm. The night settles deeper over Venice, wrapping the city in a soft veil of silence, as if the lagoon itself is holding its breath. The water reflects the moon with a gentle shimmer, and in that reflection you can almost see the centuries layered beneath the surface. The rise, the glory, the soft decline. Venice stands between memory and presence, between what it once commanded and what it now quietly holds. Let your breath drift slowly outward and gently in again, like a tide that no longer rushes, but ebbs with calm acceptance. We have reached the era when Venice, though no longer the heartbeat of the Mediterranean, becomes something else, something dreamlike, enduring, luminous in a way that power alone can never create. By this time, the great powers of Europe have shifted. Spain and Portugal command the oceans. The Ottoman Empire dominates the East. Northern kingdoms forge new alliances, new ships, new ideas. Venice, once the crossroads of continents, now watches from the edges as trade routes reshape themselves around lands far from its waters. But Venice does not crumble, it transforms. Its strength turns inward, toward art, music, beauty, tradition. It becomes a city that understands the value of slowness, of ritual, of memory. A city that glows softly in its own twilight, like a candle that refuses to be extinguished because the light is too precious, too warm, too full of stories. Imagine walking through Venice in this period, under the gentle hush of a late-night fog. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of salt lime plaster and old wood warmed during the day. Through the mist, the domes of churches appear and disappear like floating lanterns. The bells toll the hour, a deep, resonant hum that seems to vibrate in the bones of the city. The streets are quieter now, not empty, but slower. A few merchants still carry goods from distant lands, but their voices are softer. A gondolier wraps his cloak around his shoulders and rests his or on his lap, humming a tune passed down through generations. A couple walks beneath an archway, their conversation barely more than a murmur, as though respecting the night. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your mind drift as we step deeper into this softened Venice. In these years, the city becomes a sanctuary of the arts. Painters fill canvases with scenes of everyday life, gondolas gliding through narrow canals, masked figures crossing bridges at dusk, market stalls lit by lanterns. Musicians compose works that echo through vast basilicas and intimate salons. Writers and poets find inspiration in the city's blend of sorrow and splendor, capturing its melancholy beauty in verses that feel like sighs. The world may no longer rely on Venice for trade or strategy, but it turns to Venice for wonder. Travelers from distant countries arrive, stepping onto its docks with awe. They come not as envoys or conquerors, but as seekers of beauty. They wander through its labyrinth of alleys, their footsteps echoing softly. They describe Venice in journals and letters as a dream, a floating painting, a city suspended between water and sky. This new identity does not change the reality of decline, but it softens it. Venice becomes a mirror, not only of its own past, but of the emotions carried by those who visit. Some see romance, some see loss, some see magic, some see memory. Venice reflects all of it with quiet grace. Even in decline, the Republic remains proud. It still elects doges in solemn ceremonies, still maintains its councils with careful balance, still protects its traditions, processions, festivals, rituals that fill the air with song and soft candlelight. On certain nights, the city seems to shine from within. Imagine standing in Piazza San Marco on a still summer evening. The square glows with golden lamps. The basilica's mosaics shimmer faintly in the warm light. Music drifts from an orchestra seated beneath white awnings. People gather not in haste, but with gentle appreciation, as though afraid to disturb the moment. You feel the marble cool beneath your feet. The lagoon lies just beyond, whispering softly against the stones. Venice may no longer command the seas, but it commands the heart. Let your breath move slower still as we drift into the city's deeper twilight. Economically, the Republic continues to weaken. Wars strain its resources. New diseases occasionally sweep through, stealing voices and extinguishing lights in quiet homes. Some territories are lost, some treaties fail. The walls of distant fortresses crumble against forces too strong to resist. But Venice herself endures. The city bends, never breaks. It owes this not to armies or wealth, but to the lagoon, that patient guardian. The waters protect it from invasion. The shifting tides make conquest costly and unattractive. The city is too strange, too intricate, too intertwined with its watery cradle to be easily taken. And so Venice ages with dignity. Its colors soften, its palaces fade gently, its markets quieten, its songs deepen into something nostalgic, tender, and steady. From where you rest, imagine drifting in a small boat through a silent canal late at night. The water is smooth as glass. The buildings lean close, their reflections doubling their gentle wear. A single lantern burns in a high window, casting a warm oval of gold onto the stone. You hear the distant call of a night watchman, the flutter of pigeons shifting their wings on a rooftop, the soft sigh of the tides turning. Venice does not roar in its twilight. It whispers, and the whisper is beautiful. Soon, the Republic will come to its quiet end in the political storms of the 18th century. But even then, its spirit will not fade. Venice will become something eternal, something dreamlike, something that belongs not to any empire, but to time itself. For now, rest in this gentle chapter, where decline is not tragedy, but transformation, where the forgotten empire shines more softly than ever beneath the moonlit lagoon. The night over the lagoon is unusually still, the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred. The water rests without a ripple, as if honoring something solemn and inevitable. Venice, aged but graceful, stands in the moonlight with the dignity of a queen who knows her reign is ending, not in chaos, but in a gentle bow to time itself. Let your breath soften, slow and warm. You are drifting into the final chapters of a long, beautiful life, the twilight of the Venetian Republic. By the late 18th century, the world has changed entirely. Nations rise with engines of industry, armies move with thunderous precision, and politics shift like storm clouds guided by new winds. Venice, once the center of trade between continents, has become a quiet spectator, admired but no longer decisive in the affairs of empires. Yet the Republic endures, until a stranger arrives. Napoleon Bonaparte, young, brilliant, relentless, sweeps through northern Italy like a tide none can resist. His armies move with speed and certainty, winning battles with strategies that seem to belong to another age. Cities surrender or fall, kingdoms tremble. And in this great rearranging of Europe, Venice becomes a puzzle piece in a game played by forces far greater than its tired resources can match. It is the spring of 1797, and Venice stands alone. Imagine the city during these days, the air thick with anticipation, with fear softened by disbelief. After all, Venice has survived so much: invasions, plagues, storms, the shifting markets of the world. It has endured for more than 1,000 years. The idea that it could simply end feels impossible. But history respects neither longevity nor beauty. Let your breath move gently, as though brushing the surface of the lagoon. Napoleon demands that Venice dissolve its ancient structures. The Doge must abdicate, the councils must disband, the Republic must cease to exist. And Venice, without allies, without an army large enough to resist, without the wealth that once commanded, understands that resistance would mean destruction, not only of buildings and documents, but of lives, families, memories. And so the decision is made. Venice will surrender not out of weakness, but out of love for itself. It will bow so that it may continue to exist. On May 12, 1797, the Great Council meets for the last time. The hall, once filled with vigorous debate and confident voices, is hushed. Councillors sit with their heads lowered, the weight of centuries pressing gently upon them. The Doge, Ludovico Manin, dressed in flowing red robes edged with gold, stands before them with trembling hands. He is not a warrior. He never needed to be. Venice had been his armor until now. He speaks softly, acknowledging the end of the Republic. He resigns. And with that single act, the oldest surviving republic in the world quietly lays down its banners. There are no riots, no dramatic torchlit marshes, no thunder of rebels, just silence. A silence thicker and heavier than any fog that has ever drifted across the lagoon. Imagine standing in Piazza San Marco that evening. The sun has long set. The square is lit by lamplight, the basilica's mosaics glowing faintly, their brilliance muted by sorrow. People walk slowly, as if afraid their footsteps will break the fragile stillness. Some weep quietly, others bow their heads. A few stare upward, toward the winged lion atop the column, as if trying to memorize its shape before history turns another page. Yet Venice does not collapse. It does not scream. It does not crumble beneath the weight of conquest. Instead, it breathes. The lagoon cradles the city as gently as it did on the first night centuries ago, when refugees sought safety among the reeds. The water does not change. The moon does not dim. The city, though humbled, remains whole. Let your breath match that calm resilience. After Napoleon takes control, Venice is handed to Austria, traded like a jewel between empires. The new rulers impose their laws, their systems, their languages of administration. But beneath it all, Venice remains Venice, a place too unique, too intricately woven with water and memory to be reshaped by foreign hands. Life continues, quieter than before. Masks still appear during festivals. Glassmakers still work their glowing furnaces. Children still run along narrow alleys, their laughter echoing against time-worn stones. Old gondoliers still guide their boats through silent canals, remembering the days when the lion's banner flew proudly over the Adriatic. Venice adapts, because that is what Venice has always done, from its first fragile huts to its towering palaces, from tides of refugees to tides of trade, from the roar of empire to the whisper of twilight. And in this late era, the city begins to feel something new, not the weight of power, but the glow of myth. Artists come to capture its fading splendor. Writers come to describe its dreamlike beauty. Travelers arrive seeking a city that has survived both glory and loss with equal grace. Venice, no longer a ruler, becomes a memory alive, breathing, shimmering like a lantern floating on dark water. As you drift closer to sleep, hold this image delicately, a republic that ends not in fire or collapse, but in a whisper that floats across the lagoon, touches the arches of the Doge's palace, slips beneath bridges, and lingers in the reflections of the night. The forgotten empire does not disappear. It becomes eternal. The night over Venice is as gentle as a sigh, as calm as a memory. The lagoon lies still beneath the stars, its surface glowing with soft reflections of ancient arches and lamplit windows. Venice is no longer a republic, no longer a power on the seas, no longer the voice that once shaped empires and guided crusaders. And yet it remains, not as it was, but as something quieter, something deeper, something timeless. Let your breath drift softly in and out, like ripples spreading from a gondola's slow oar. We are entering the final chapter of this story, not the end of Venice, but the beginning of what it becomes for the world, and what it becomes for you tonight. After the fall of the Republic, Venice moves through the 19th and early 20th centuries with the grace of an aging dancer, slower, perhaps, but still elegant, still aware of rhythms the world has forgotten. The city becomes part of new nations, new administrations, new dreams. Empires rise and fall around it, but Venice remains suspended, almost untouched, like a pearl caught between tides. Artists wander its silent canals at dawn, sketchbooks pressed to their chests, capturing the quiet decay that somehow enhances its beauty. Poets describe it as a dream floating upon water, a vision of melancholy wrapped in the scent of salt and distant history. Travelers, young and old, arrive with hearts open, seeking something they cannot name, and finding it in the way Venice glows, even when its marble fades. The railways arrive. Electricity glows behind windows. Tourists gather in Piazza San Marco. Gondolas glide beneath cameras as well as lanterns. But beneath all these layers of modern life, the old Venice persists in the sound of water against stone, in the whisper of night wind along the Grand Canal, in the way fog drifts like a ghost through narrow alleys. Let your breath loosen into a rhythm as slow as the lagoon at midnight. You walk along a quiet canal late in the evening. The mist is thin tonight, clinging gently to the edges of buildings like fingers of silk. A lone gondola passes its shape, dark and graceful. The gondolier humming a low, nostalgic tune carried from generations past. The water reflects the lights above in warm, trembling circles. Every ripple seems to contain a secret. This Venice, the Venice after empire, is not defined by power or wealth. It is defined by endurance, by beauty, by memory, by the way its streets and waterways invite you to slow down, to breathe, to feel. Perhaps it has always been this way. Even at its height, Venice was never loud. Its strength lay in silence, in diplomacy, in careful movement. Its glory was not shouted, but carved, painted, woven, sung. And so, even after the world changed around it, Venice continued being what it had always been at night, a city of whispers and echoes. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine standing upon the Accademia Bridge, looking out across the Grand Canal. The water is smooth. Gondolas glide like ink strokes across a page. The domes of Santa Maria della Salute rise like a soft dream against the night sky. Far below, the sound of water kissing stone repeats, steady and soothing like a heartbeat. The city seems alive, not with noise, but with presence, as if the memories of 1,000 years still move in the air. And you are part of that stillness now. The night grows warmer in its quietness. The lagoon breathes like a living creature, exhaling gently beneath the moon. For every story Venice holds, of refugees and fishermen, merchants and sailors, doges and councils, crusaders and artists, it holds 10,000 more in silence. Stories of ordinary people who lived, loved, hoped, and dreamed along these waters. Tonight, you drift among those dreams. Let your body relax fully. Let your thoughts soften. Let your breath become a tide. In the silence of this moment, Venice becomes something intimate. It becomes a feeling, the feeling of floating without fear, of standing between sea and sky, of hearing far-off footsteps echo beneath arches built centuries ago. It becomes the soft glow of a lantern reflected in ripples, the distant toll of a bell, the warm hush of water shifting beneath a wooden hull. It becomes a lullaby made of stone and tide. And as the night deepens, Venice seems to lean closer, as if whispering its final gift. Empires rise and fall, but beauty remains. Power fades, but memory keeps breathing. And even in decline, there can be grace. This is the lesson of Venice, the forgotten empire, before the world arrived in crowds and photographs and postcards. A city that survived by listening to the water. A city that thrived by trusting one another. A city that learned to glow even in its twilight, softer and softer, until its light became something eternal. Take one last deep, gentle breath. Feel the calm of the lagoon surround you. Feel the moonlight settle over your shoulders. Feel the centuries drift into silence. And now, slowly, peacefully, let yourself drift with Venice into sleep. The story rests. The water stills. The night holds you. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be calm and filled with quiet light.